Joining us right now to talk more about it, the Wall Street Journal's global economics editor, John Hilsenrath. John, what's your take on this plan? Good morning to you. We see that the individual side of the tax cut plan is a little more complicated, but it's pretty straightforward on the corporate side. 20% corporate rate, 25% pass-through, and a small fee for repatriation.
I agree, Maria. You know, it's interesting that the administration is really counting on the corporate side of this tax overhaul to lift the economy, but it's on the individual side where they've got a lot of challenges. There's disagreements in the House and Senate on what the top rate should be. There's disagreements about what you do with state and local deductions. There's disagreements about what you do with medical expense deductions, and they have a lot to reconcile over the next couple of months on the individual side to get this thing done. And, you know, it's going to be a real challenge, I think, for them to get there.
John, it's Kevin Kelly. One of the talking points that's coming out of the Democratic side is that the timing of this is not appropriate because corporations are hitting all-time highs on the stock market. Their corporate profits are at all-time highs. What is the argument and thesis, and can it play out that should we get corporate tax cuts to the 20% level, that it will translate into jobs? Because the left is still upset about buybacks, increased dividends of the money so that they got from George W. Bush's tax cuts. So what do you think about that?
I mean, the argument is that the high corporate tax rate in the United States makes it uncompetitive on a global basis. You know, we have a 35% top rate in the United States. But then we also have a lot of breaks that allow companies to bring that rate down. You know, rates in places like Ireland are much lower than that, closer to 12%. The idea is that if you equalize the U.S. tax rate with other countries, then companies have more incentive to spend and invest right here in the United States. You know, the challenge for the administration from a political perspective is how do you sell that? You know, what most Americans are saying is, what's in that for me? You know, the Democrats are going to attack them and say, you're just giving this money away to companies. How does this trickle down, so to speak, to individual households? It has to happen by companies investing more and by them turning around and hiring more. In terms of stocks at an all-time high, you know, I think the argument that the administration would be making right now is we're 8 years into an expansion. The big question is, how do you keep it going? How do you keep what's turned into be a pretty long-lasting recovery going for a few more years?
John, James.
No, I just want to add one thing before you ask your question. The Democrats lose the right to complain and moan and whine about this tax reform package because not one of them is putting a finger on this. They lose the right to complain about it. And you know what?
They don't want to participate in government.
The state and local tax deduction, as you pointed out in the break, is going away in blue states because they won't work with Republicans, and that is the end of it.
Yeah.
That was my question, John.
Can I just, David, can I
has this train left the station, or is it possible now, finally, blue state Democrats would say, okay, we're willing to negotiate over how to grow the economy to try and save our deductions?
I mean, I don't think Republicans are going to get many Democrats working with them. You might get a senator or two, you know, particularly some who are up for re-election who are willing to do it, but I don't think you're going to get a lot of them. You know, I think what they would say is, you know, their analogy would be what happened with the health care overhaul. Republicans refused to work with them on health care and come up with their own plan, and now we're stuck with this health care system that, you know, that's in a state of disrepair. I think one of the risks that Republicans take is the same risk Democrats made on health care. If they do this just on a party line basis, you know, what's going to happen if Democrats come back and they're in power in a couple of years and they say, we want to redo that whole thing, we don't like the way they did it?
Yeah, it's a good point.
Really quickly, it's tricky. The math is tricky on the Senate side, the graveyard for the Obamacare repeal. With the allegations against Roy Moore, that election down in Alabama is December the 12th. And you have John McCain, who repeatedly has shown a willingness to give a thumbs down to anything that President Trump gets behind.
That's right.
So the math is very tough.
Another issue that
the math is tough on tax reform too. They only have 52 votes to work with.
That's what she's talking about, John. Let me ask you this, because Kevin just brought up carried interest. This deduction hasn't really been a focal point of this plan. No. I asked Stephen Mnuchin about this yesterday, John. I want to get your reaction to what he said. Listen to this.
This is a highly interesting issue to a very small part of the population. Now, the president said on the campaign that he wanted to change the rules for hedge funds and carried interest. The House has proposed going to a 3-year holding period. I think that's a big step in the right direction.
What do you think, John? Will we see any change here? Should there be a change in the carried interest deduction?
Well, you know, it's puzzling because the president did say that there should be, and they haven't done anything on it. I haven't gone through the entire Senate bill. It just dropped yesterday, but I don't think it's in the Senate bill either.
No,
it's not.
And you know, so you have to wonder. I mean, if they haven't put it in the House bill or the Senate bill, are they going to do it? And I will say this. They need money. You know, there's trillions of dollars in tax cuts they're trying to get through, and they only have a $1.5 trillion bucket to work with. You have to wonder why they're not going after that when they could get some revenue out of it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and just so you know, a member of the Big Six, Gary Cohn, has completely talked about it repeatedly that they are going to get rid of the carried interest. And it was such a hotly political issue on the campaign trail that for now that they don't even include it or address it, it's just another talking point against them to get it done.
I feel like this is the reason that Barack Obama used to say, pay your fair share. That one rule. I know you don't agree.
This is just so the viewers understand out there that what the carried interest is. It's a rule that allows hedge funds and private equity funds to be taxed at a much lower rate than, say, individuals are, up at as high as 39.6%.
Right.
It allows them to be taxed at capital gains rates as low as 15%.
Right,
well,
exactly.
It's taxed as an investment income because that's what it is.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. John Hilsenrath, good to talk with you, sir. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thanks a lot.